Hi, everybody. Oh, look at that. Christian's ready. So today, we're holding up our implements of destruction here. Today, we have something new for you. Today, I want to introduce you to a special friend, photographer, sometimes coworker, sometimes just hanging out, creative force du jour, Christian Domecq.
Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Welcome.
Long time no see.
Long time no see. That's right. I saw you like 2 minutes ago. It was crazy.
I know. Feels like an eternity.
We have something special for you today. You might have seen it during the webinar registration. We have created for ourselves a macro challenge. And when Christian and I were discussing what kind of fun we could have with macro, I suggested, all right, let's do this. Let's see what we can do with the retro reversing adapter and a fork and the lenses that we have. And that's what we did. So for the past couple of weeks, Christian and I have been bouncing ideas off of each other and separately working. Like, I'm East Coast, he's West Coast. And we're delighted to show those results to you today. Yes. But first off, you might not know about Christian. So I'm going to give him a couple of seconds to say who he is today, because it might change day to day.
It's true. You never know what you're going to get when you're talking to the Christian. Well, I'm a 16-plus year long-term employee with a little company called B&H Photo. I've been part of their road marketing team for the majority of that time. And my day-to-day duties included, everything from travel to different events. Like, I'm sure we've seen countless events together over the years, and just trying to get the good word out for equipment and tactics and you name it, and carry on the tradition of B&H as a whole, reaching out to our customers. So that's what I've been doing for almost 16 years.
Awesome. And my gosh, we've been talking for a long time about a variety of topics from music to art to photography to the business. And this is just a long time of friendship and comradeship and understanding creativity and tools. Yeah. So I'm going to probably, you know what, Christian, since there seems to be a little background noise where you are.
Some background noise?
Yeah, if you don't mind muting for a second, I'm gonna share my screen and give people a little taste of what's to come. So we have a variety of images to show you guys, and we're going to go through these in loving detail. And it was a real blast doing this. And I just wanted to say, like, right from the beginning, the fun part was that we each had a humble tool that we're going to start with, right? So Christian's fork, I got to say, right off the bat, it was much more interesting than my fork. Do you agree, Christian?
I don't know if it's more interesting, but it's definitely a fork. I got that cool little thing on the inside, the little diamond cutout shape there that pulled from the drawer, and thought, you know what, this is going to be a fun fork to fork around with.
Yeah. It was forking good, I guess. That's the last fork pun, I swear.
No, it's not. It's not even near the last fork pun.
Yeah. So we're going to look at Christian's images first, because he had the more interesting fork. And you gave us these two images off of in the beginning, just to give us a sense of scale.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, I was a little, not little, I was a lot impressed with how close one can get by flipping the lens around. And I just wanted to convey that. So the back of this fork, you can see that, I think it's on the IDA USA, that's 0.5 millimeter for that USA. And I wanted to show some kind of scale, so I found the old plastic ruler that I literally gaff taped the fork to and tried to get it up underneath the light. This just blew me away when you start realizing how much detail you're going to get when you're that close up to something that small. I mean, I love it.
And let me point out, Now, just for emphasis, what we're doing here is we're taking, in your case, you had a zoom lens. I had a 50 millimeter lens. And just instead of facing it the way you normally would, reversing it, and then just putting this reversing adapter on the front and the back so that it can communicate with the camera. So this is step one. If you are interested in getting into macro photography and you don't want to get a whole bunch of specialized equipment, if at the very least you start with reversing a lens that you own and getting a focusing rail, you could be totally ready to be making images very similar to what we're making. In fact, exactly like, but I don't know, probably better. I mean, like, Christian, I love the images that you made, and let's get into them. But that's how simple this is. If you just want to get started, do that. And let's check in with everybody in the chat really quick. Not only do I want to hear where you're from, which is great, tell me where you're tuning in from, but also let us know, are you experienced with macro photography? And if you are you reversing your lenses, or do you have a dedicated macro lens, or both? Let us know in the chat. Back to the images. So I love this scale image. This is almost art in itself. And the part that really got me was going back into this, was just seeing these numbers look so perfect when you're far away. Yeah. But they're not. They're imperfect.
They're not. And that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, that's a whole new world when you're that close up. So
wow. All right, well, let's take a look at this first one.
So this one is the first. This is Fork 1. I had a really creative naming scheme. I just named them as I took them. And what I was immediately struck, and I should point out, I have 2 light sources. That blue background is actually a Luxli light turned to a particular color blue, shooting almost into the camera like that. And then I have a small little loom cube that I would face to the front. And that's kind of how I got this. And it immediately made me think that this was like a skyscraper, some, futuristic city kind of thing. And I really enjoyed the way it looked.
Yeah, it's good. And then you moved on. Is this from that? Oh, there you go. There's your loom cube on the left.
There's a loom cube off the side there. Exactly right. Yeah.
And then so that's left to the other side.
So that's essentially what we're looking at there. Yeah.
And tell me about your setup now that we're finally seeing it. What camera and lens do you have?
Sure. So right now I'm using the Fuji X-T3, and I had the kit 18 to 55 lens reversed with the NOVOFLEX, the FUX Retro. We're not supposed to say the whole name out loud.
If you say it with a German accent, it sounds okay.
It's the Fuchs Retro.
About Fuchs.
And, and one thing I didn't count for, by the way, was that it's a APS-C size sensor, which you have that built-in crop value that I don't think you had to worry about because you're using full frame. And it brought that the fork even closer than I had anticipated, and also gave that focus range. I mean, it's really, sometimes in fact, if you look on the ring there on that the back, you can see where I got too close to the fork trying to focus in on a detail.
Oh, right here? Yeah. That's what those marks are.
That's what those marks are. Nice. But yeah, it added for some extra kind of crop value magnification, which I love.
Nice. This next shot just really took my breath away when I saw it. Tell me about this.
Yeah, this is also one of my favorites. So this is just the flat tines of the fork. Backlight, the slightly, that orangish yellow light with the adapter on the loom cube, and again with the Luxli providing the foreground light. And it just, through the viewfinder, or actually through the back screen, it looked like massive chunks of metal. Which I guess it is at this magnification, but it really had that presence. It's like, that is a serious ton of steel. And it's just so funny we put that in our mouth, it's like, whoa.
Right? It looks smooth, but when you get up close, it's not that smooth.
It's not that smooth. And you can see where the manufacturing process is definitely, it's probably a stamp cut, bam, it's not it's not high end silverware, but I actually think it adds to the effect because of that. See.
Do you remember how many images you shot to focus stack this?
Most of these would have been around 50 to 100. This one, I think, was about 100, and I think I did too many, to be honest. And focus stacking is a fairly new thing for me to experience, and I've learned a lot, and I need to learn more. And we can talk about that later on. But yeah, I think this is around the 70-ish mark on this one, and I think it was too many. And often the shots I was going for were not flat on, and that means that I had two angles to kind of mess with, the angle of the fork and the distance from fore to aft, and it's a lot of range when you're that close up, to be honest. So
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's really, I'm going to pop out of the screen sharing for a second. Yeah. It's the difference between shooting something flat on and turning it when you're doing macro is night and day. It's the difference between maybe 20 shots or 30 shots and 100 or 200 shots.
It is.
To get that depth of field in. So I feel you, man.
Yeah.
I feel you. But this image, I love it. I love it. It's just so successful.
It has good presence, I thought. Yeah, there you go. There's another behind the scenes there.
So this I just want to say also, like, I don't know if I had expectations about the capability of APS-C and macro, but the quality that you got out of this was astonishing.
Yeah, it's really it's really worked out well. Again, I think some of the I don't want to say limitations, but where I thought maybe it could have been a little bit sharper here and there, I think that's more limitations of me not knowing the software for stacking as well, and making a few probably not optimal choices in the settings. But when it was on, and it's just, wow, it's a whole new world. So yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Beautiful.
Fork sunrise.
This is, wow. I wonder how many of these were your tooth marks. Oh,
I know, right? No wonder why I have bad teeth. Yeah, all the scars for every time it's been thrown into the silverware drawer. It's laid upon these poor tines.
But now we get into the part of macro that's so fascinating, which is things become abstract as you magnify them more. And I think that you achieve that in different ways as we go through. But this is the first time when I didn't immediately know it was a fork.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what did you think was successful about this? And did anything about this did you want to do differently? Yes.
Well, one thing, everyone probably familiar with lighting in some form or the other. This, by the way, is not that's not a gradiated background. That is the same Luxli light tilted, and because the inverse square rule also applies when you're doing macro. So what you're looking at there is just the light being further away from the subject at one end to the other.
Oh, that's cool.
And I would have preferred to have more light on the subject on the side there to kind of pop out, make it a little more 3D. I think it's a little flat. So this is not my favorite, but I liked where it was going as far as the presence of the tines.
No, that's really cool. I have put diffused light sources behind the objects, but I haven't tried angling them away.
That's what that is.
The things you learn.
The things you learn.
That's cool, man. Even more abstract.
Yeah,
nice clean edges.
Yeah, that one came out well. Again, Luxli in the background, the Lume Cube without the little warming gel on the front. And by the way, blue for me really lent itself as a color for metal. Of course, it's cold to begin with, right? Yeah. And the fork really loved it. So
I love it when it pops into the shadow areas. I love it when the highlights are white and the shadows go blue.
Yeah.
And that looks amazing. Oh.
Here's one similar to the fork sunrise, but trying to isolate fewer of the tines. Strong blue light on the side. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones, and I would like to explore this a little more because I think it lost a little bit down there in the middle, but not much. The this looks like a giant plate steel, like we used to walk over in New York City when they put it over the manhole covers when they're doing repairs, you know, this massive chunk of metal.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah, it does. And this one completely fooled me when I first saw it.
Did do the reversal on you?
I thought, I don't know, I thought you found some cool background, and this was the end of the fork. And you're trying to throw me for a loop.
Yeah.
But you did unintentionally, because I've seen forks that have that shape at the end, and I'm sure your fork does. But
yeah.
like, as a designer, like, you would say, how can I make this shape a motif? And like, but here you really took advantage. It's gorgeous. That's cool.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go.
And here's your BTS of it.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's talk about your setup a little bit here.
Okay.
How did you support all of this stuff? What do you got going on here?
So I got the NOVOFLEX. This is the mini pod. Probably can't see much in the thumbnail there. This is the mini pod. My last configuration, which is flat out on the table, and I have a small magic ball holding everything up, and then the camera reverse ring and the rail there. And that was, you know, this served itself well because it can get pretty much any height I want off the table at odd angles if I really wanted to, although I try to keep it flat as possible just because that's me. And yeah, I mean, it's rock solid and no issues. And that large knob at the end of the magic ball makes it real easy to kind of tilt it into position. And you see the Luxli on the side there with the small open tripod, and yeah, and that clamp, that little nog arm there, right? An old Icon clamp it was designed for lighting, I guess, but whatever, it works perfect for getting that.
Right.
You need about 4 more of those.
And your focusing rail is the Castel Mini too.
That is correct. Yep, that's exactly right.
Now, if anybody else sees the other Easter egg in here, that's part of the support mechanism, let us know in the chat. We'll leave it up there for a couple seconds.
You're right. It's not being disrespectful to them.
might be even easier. No, it's funny. I was chatting with Martin about this, and Martin's response was, "They're tools. They're tools. Yeah. They're tools. Use them." So let's see if anybody catches it. So, yeah, this is great. This is typical in macro. Everything's got to lock down. Yes. I mean, that's one thing that I discovered is that, yeah, your every motion is amplified and magnified so much. You got to get as stable as possible. So you could take a heavy ball head and set it on your table. You could clamp it down, but making sure that you start with stable so that everything you do after that is really important.
I think I would have preferred to also get the NOVOFLEX quick release adapter for this, because one thing on the Fuji, the battery cover is kind of locked on the mount there, on the slide there on the Castel. Gotcha. So I would have to disassemble everything just to swap out the battery, or get a power supply like the Tether Tools case power, something like that to do continuous power. But every time my battery depleted, it was a disassembly. That was the end of that shot, essentially. Got it.
Well, we'll work on that for next time, and it's definitely something to learn through. But of course, it's a system, so it's easy to add that part in.
Well, that's what makes it beautiful. In fact, that also goes back to the Easter egg in there. It's a system, and since there's quarter thread 20 all over the place, holes everywhere, I can mount stuff to. For a while, I was kind of goofing around with the arm in front of the lens and mounted underneath the rail because there's a quarter 20 thread in there as well. And it didn't work the way I wanted it to, but I could see it working in certain other aspects. So, I mean, it really is a system. It's very flexible, and it's modular. I think that's my favorite word to use with NOVOFLEX. Always has been.
Truth. And you'll see in the chat, Martin is making suggestions for particular products that might help in this. Okay. He said a Q mount plus a QPL1 plate could be used for this. Yeah. So there's lots of options, but coming straight from the man himself, Martin, that's probably the first best option. So
I'm going to take his advice. I don't know. He may know what he's talking about. I could be wrong, but I think he does.
Since nobody said it in the chat, next time Christian and I gather, we're going to be doing another macro challenge after this. We're going to be adding one more thing into this. And that one more thing we're adding into this, he's using as a support system. It's the auto bellows. Or it's the bellows that you see right there. They happen to have a whole bunch of 3/8 and 1/4 20 screws, mounting threads in them. So it was an ideal platform for him to put his mounting arm in to hold the fork up. It was stable, right? So
it was stable. It's perfect. It worked exactly like I needed it.
So tools are tools.
Tools.
Oh, this is cool.
There's another exploration of that center cutout. Now you can see where the other tines are coming in, and it lends itself more to looking like a fork, if you will. But love all the scratch marks in the metal there. And again, it just looked very thick, like this massive chunk of plate steel. So I just And I got the lighting a little bit better in that one. This is a fun one. There's another one. This one played reversal with my brain, still does.
It's breaking my head. It's 100% breaking my head right now. Like if I cover up the right-hand side of it, I would never figure out what's positive or negative space, or what's coming forward and what's going backwards.
Yeah.
It's really artfully done.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fun. Again, just a Luxli in the Lume Cube. Luxli on a yellow goldish kind of color, and the Lume Cube just bare with this blue kind of haze that it throws out there. And that was fun. I enjoyed this one. Would like to explore that one a little bit more.
Simple tools, man. Simple tools. Man. Oh. And this one is I don't know. I have 3 favorites. This is in the top 3, and I can't order them because I love them all. This one is the most abstract. And I would not know that it was part of a fork unless you told me, and we were working on this together.
Tine Tower at night. I just really wanted to isolate a single tine. That's not a crop in. That's just me shooting vertical. And it's I was able to kind of duplicate what I was doing on the very first picture, with the 4 tines up there. Now with a little more creative. Now that is actually a background that is a 2 pieces of crepe paper, 1 blue, 1 yellow. So I could free up the Luxli instead of providing color, providing more side light. So
good choice. And this is where I love seeing the blue scratches and having the light coming from 2 different directions, having one color from one direction and one in the other. They fill in different areas.
Yep.
So amazing. Now we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to post-processing, but in Helicon Focus, there's some ways to go back and reprocess to eliminate some of those artifacts. But overall, I think Helicon really handled this well, especially given all the gradients that you have in this image.
Right. Yeah, it looks like online here you don't see it quite as smooth as you would. But you're right, and I'm kind of blown away with how the software can figure out what it's looking at. I get the math sort of behind it, but there's a lot of texture in that, and it did a pretty good job rendering it well.
Yeah. I have a question, and I'm going to put you on screen again so you can hold it up.
Okay.
Which lens did you use?
Oh, yeah. So this is, I don't know if you can see that. That is the Fuji, might focus, might not, 18 to 55 kind of kit lens, standard kit lens, if you will. When you buy your Fujis, and it worked out pretty well, to be honest. It gave me a little bit of zoom control, although I found myself racked out at its furthest range. I basically shot like this about 90% of the time. It's completely out, which would be about 35 to 55 is where I was at for the most part. 18 and 23 seemed like I had to get it almost inside that area, inside the lens there to focus, and that's a little dangerous. But turned out pretty good. Shut off all the stabilization, of course. And by the way, I was using focus stacking, and thanks to the ability for the reversing ring to pass through all that electronic information, the camera was able to stack. So I used the internal stacking menu inside the Fuji. Also tried some manual as well, but I felt that the consistency that I was getting out of the internal setting at 50, 75, 100, some on images, and then spacing it out that way, it was fine. So it was just able to make those micro adjustments, and I got better results with that than manually doing it.
Great. So if we didn't, we make some assumptions as we start these. For people who don't know exactly what this ring does, and I'm going to make sure I have all the pins facing. What this ring does for me, for my Nikon Z, is it takes the information from the camera and the lens and transmits them over this stretchy cable, right?
Yep.
And instead of having, the business end of your lens right into your body, your camera body, you turn it around and then you use this cable to reverse the lens, which changes the magnification, which can change the sharpness, which the big surprise here is some of your standard kit lenses can actually be sharper doing macro than they are doing standard focal distance work. And you're like some of your kit lenses that just come with your camera, those wide zooms or those regular zooms, they turn out to be spectacular at macro work. And, it might be the thing that gets you from, I wish I was doing macro to I'm doing macro now.
Yeah.
And that's the really fun part that this one simple accessory can unlock. Having a retro reversing ring can get you into macro in a really fun way. So.
And if you want to approximate what your lens is going to do when you get the reversing ring or before you pick it up, is just pick it up and use it like a loop. Flip that puppy around and look at a piece of newsprint or something very small, and you'll get a good indication of what that's going to look like.
Yeah, you could do it. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. I was recording something earlier today that I didn't get to put into the presentation, but there's a process called freelensing. You do it with your camera too. So we can talk about it more then. But let's go back to this beautiful. I just wanted to see this image again. It's so cool. When you reprocess it, I want to print. So that's great.
All right.
This is beautiful. All right. Another optical illusion. Christian, you seem to be very good at these optical illusions. Which part's coming forward and which part's receding? Yeah.
Any guesses? Any guesses? So really, we're looking at the front of the fork, and that is a detent. That is not raised. So but lighting a certain way, it looks like it's going the opposite direction.
It's all about light.
Yeah.
It's all about light and focus and composition. Okay, it's everything.
It's everything.
Hulk.
Yeah.
I just rewatched Thor Ragnarok. This is perfect.
Very good. So it's on your mind. Yeah. Just another exploration of the tines and trying to get more of that rough underside, or the middle, I should say, side of the metal there.
I'm still having trouble understanding which surface it is. Like my brain is just not comprehending that could be around the side. I don't get it. It's so delish. So delish. All right. So now we're going to switch over. I took some pictures too.
Did.
We like I said in the beginning, we were working on separate coasts. We're working with separate camera systems. Christian was working with his Fuji. It was an XT3. And I'm working with a Nikon Z6. And so that's full frame. He's got APS-C. And I didn't have a zoom lens at the time that I could reverse. So what I did was I used my 50 millimeter lens. My 50 millimeter lens is a good focal length for this. It also happens to have a 58 millimeter thread, and I can assemble this for you guys. I'm going to show you. Actually, we'll show you with the other camera. So I'm just going to put that over here. So what I can do with this is I can say, here's the 58 millimeter thread, and I just thread it into the end of the lens. And then I take off the lens cap here, and I have to put on, because this is an F-mount lens and not a Z-mount lens, I have to put on this FTZ adapter, and then I have to take this puppy and put that on. So now I have a fully stacked up. So this is now the front. and not the back of the lens, and this goes into the camera body. And this would be what I put on this camera, which is my Z6 is doing the top-down shot right now. So this is my 50mm lens reversed with the retro adapter for Nikon Z, which is NIK-Z-retro. So this was what I used for all of the shots that you're about to see. So let's get into it and take a peek. I got some background stuff here. I took I worked on some extra media because you know I'm a crazy gear hound too. Christian and I share this in common.
It's true.
But like even though I might have some stuff that I've invested in over the time, I have the same basic stuff that he does. I have a camera with a reversed lens. I have the same focusing rail, the Castel Mini 2. I'm using my NOVOFLEX Trio Pod M, where I unscrewed the legs and just put the short legs on there. And then I also put my Ninja V on there so I could record what's coming through the camera. So you guys will get to see that in a second. But then I just use a super clamp over here to a convy clamp to hold up the fork. And let's see what I got. I'll just point out also, so that I didn't shake my camera, I use a wireless intervalometer. My intervalometer of choice is the Photix Aeon, the AION. So that's how I stop it from moving during each shot. So my first shot was this. And I noticed that with the 50mm lens, it's not as advantageous as having one of the kit zoom lenses because it has some chromatic aberrations, some other aberrations at the edges, the extreme edges of the reversed lens that no amount of focus stacking could take care of. And I tried to find the sweet spot in my aperture too. And I'll just pull out for a second to say, diffraction is something you need to think about when doing macro, and that's a different topic altogether. But I just want to say, don't stop down your lens all the way. If f22 is the biggest number, don't use it. F16's, might be better. Stay around like f8, f11. It's not going to make your image sharper to stop down all the way because the light bounces off the edges of the diaphragm blades. You should take more pictures at smaller focusing steps instead. So I knew that the sweet spot with this lens was around f8 or f11, so that's what I used when I was shooting. So
by the way, it's not to interrupt you, but when I first saw this image, I thought you were using a clear plastic fork.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. I'm like, wait a minute, that's metal. Anyway, so I loved it.
Yeah, I also saw all of the damage that teeth had done, or like knives or other things that had scraped along this the whole time. And I was having some fun with this, my lighting was, we got a Nanlite Pavotube II 6C underneath the fork for color. And then I just had a spotlight coming down from on top, which was a really harsh edge light and probably could have been diffused, but I had some fun with that. My next setup, I worked on having a light behind, and another Pavotube II 6C behind it, and I have a Luxli Fiddle underneath it for color, a splash underneath across. And then I have some other support stuff here, but it turned out like this. And the thing that I realized after doing this was that, like, I really got to pay attention to cleaning these things because there's this tiny little hair just sitting there, and there's other little hairs, and I'm like, oh, I remember the darkroom days when dust was your enemy. And macro, these things could be the defining moment of an image that really tells you that you're sharp, but I think it's a little distracting. But putting a colored light behind it far away, I liked how it had the little fade off there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. And again, like, it was a fork, and I think I was just kind of getting used to shooting this field, and I knew that I was probably shooting the wrong amount of the fork because it got soft at the edges. So just another view of it. Incidentally, I took one of the support legs that you can get from NOVOFLEX, and my L bracket has a 1/4 20 on the side, and I used that to maneuver my camera while I was doing my composition. I just thought that was a fun way to
smart.
approach the component abilities of NOVOFLEX. Like, it came in handy. I screwed into something that didn't belong to NOVOFLEX. Great. You know?
Modular is as modular does.
Exactly. And I have a classic ball down underneath there too, which is rock steady. All right. So next up, I had this view where I was thinking of what can I do with casting colored shadows. And I've always wanted to play with that. So this is what I ended up having, and I really liked where it started going, where the gray paper that I had underneath, depending on the angle of the light, took on a color cast, and so did alternate edges of the fork. And I wanted to play with that shadow play. It didn't quite get what I wanted to do, but it's more abstract than the previous images, which made me happy.
Yeah, I like where you're going with this. I wasn't able to get shadows like that. I tried just briefly, and I think my problem was I had the focus so close. The physical the fork was so physically close to the front of the whole rig that there wasn't a lot of room for this kind of shadow play here. So that's something I'd like to try with maybe a different size lens, different focal length there.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think I backed off about 5 feet with that point light source to cast those crispy shadows. So to have something strong enough to cast a black shadow and then to come on an alternate angle with a color to fill in where the shadows are black was really my goal there. I'm definitely going to play with this more. This, I think, was the first successful image I had.
Now you're messing with my head here. This is because at first I thought you had blacked out those tines, and then it just, but wait a minute, it's beautiful. I love this.
It's I wouldn't know it's a fork except for when you get to this part. You see, like, I don't know what made that, but then I see this and yeah, it makes me want to go back and recreate this and put some other color in the background.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I'd like to see more of the edges too. Then I had a whack idea. A lot of these LEDs, as you know, can do color shifting through programming. So I did a sequence where it was shifting through rainbow, all hues, all 360 degrees, on the flat edges of the fork, on the side of the tines. And I was like, how is Helicon Focus going to deal with this? I'm really curious. Am I going to bust it, or is it going to actually be able to render it? And the 3 different methods of Helicon Focus rendering handled it differently. And maybe this is a good point to jump out and to do a little share of that. So I'm going to show 2 videos. The first one, and we're going to talk our way through this. This is what it looks like through the camera, taking those pictures. And I just want to say, I was not this fast, nor should you try to be this fast. I sped it up to 5 times speed so you guys can see. And this is what it looks like as you're focus stacking. You focus your lens, you turn off autofocus, you set it to manual focus, and you move the camera using the focus stacking. So what Helicon Focus does is it takes, or any of the focus stacking software you might choose, is it takes all these images and it finds the areas of focus and adds them all together, stitches them together in one final image. So you can see just how shallow the depth of field is as we're watching this going through. And I think this is the one that we're just looking at. It is. You can see the rainbow colors, the hues changing as we go through.
That's a great effect. Good thinking. I like that.
You know me, I like to play with time, right?
Sure.
So this is me adding my little fingerprint to saying I want to change things over time. So that's one look at it. And then when we say, like, in post-processing, this is what it looks like to use Helicon Focus. Not the only choice I said, but it's currently my favorite choice for doing the post processing on this. There's 3 different ways that you can do I'm just going to do a little drawing here while we're at it. There's 3 different methods. So right now this is method A, and now I'm switching to method B. And these 3 different ways use different ways to map the sharpness and combine them together. And without going into a deep explanation of this, there's plenty of people who explain the software really well. You try and see which one worked best for you as a rendering mode. And you can adjust some of these things down here and reprocess it should you want to. But this is what you would use to take all of these images and put them together. Photoshop also has it. So, but that's just a look at what it looks like to do that. And now I'm just going to go back in here, and we can, I left the whiteboard on, Christian. So if you want to draw on my images, feel free.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I really liked what was going on with the rainbow hues in here. And I think that that's something that I'm likely to try again, you know,
Yeah,
to
that's
see
nice.
that there's different things happening over time. Since we have all of these opportunities, we're taking dozens and dozens of images sometimes. Why not get a little playful with it and see what else can happen?
How many images did you shoot on this one?
I think it was about 70.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And what else we got here? So just another view. I at one point decided to invert my tripod, and I had one of the legs up on the shop table that I have here and the other 2 on the ground, because it just gave me a lower angle. I just wanted to get as tight down to the ground as I could, to the surface here. So that's one of the things that I was working on. And then I just put 2 Pavotubes on either side. Another view, another looking at it here. You could see it inverted where I had the magic ball, and then I had my panorama base, and then the Castel Mini 2, and a quick release adapter, and then all of this. So it was rock solid. It was easy to position. And then I got to work into, there you go, as you get a better view of it, of
Nice.
making this. The final image that I made was this one. And I really feel like I was starting to hit my stride. This one, I did leave that naughty hair in there. You know,
We'll call that lint. We'll say lint. It's not hair. Hair sounds bad on a fork, but lint is acceptable.
Yeah, sure, it's lint. Yeah, it's lint. So, so this one I had. I think I have the BTS. Yeah, so I had the Luxli Fiddle behind it vertically, so that it did fall off to the sides, but it was still parallel to the camera. But the side of the diffuser is what happened on the side of the fork there. And then I started playing with this object that you got me interested in, the AdaptaLux. This is the first time I really got to get in there and light this from 5 angles simultaneously. So that's how I could really start picking up all of this different detail from different angles. And boy, I'm really stoked about where this is going, and I can't wait to our next challenge. I'll probably be working on stuff in between. But I had a lot of fun with this one. And
Me too.
And yeah, so that's just a pretty simple setup there. Just flat on the table. Everything's all there. I say simple, you know, like I think we both kind of like complicated, don't we?
Yeah, sure. It's a challenge. I love it. I also like the DIY nature of at least for me. I'm in the setting where I do not have all of my gear. I'm out in California, taking care of some family stuff, and so I brought a few things with me, and some things you guys helped me get, and pretty much stuff around the house. Like, oh, I need to get another reflector. What can I do? Let me grab a piece of paper and some gaff tape and make a snoot. So I have a snoot.
I love that.
Right? I mean, this is DIY at its best. That lovely light, so soft. And that's just on the Loom Cube, right? Yeah. So don't be afraid to DIY things. Maybe if I had a proper snoot, I could do a little bit more. But it needed it in the moment, and it worked out. So I like overcomplicating my setup too.
What was the hardest thing about this whole process? What was the biggest challenge that you had?
Well, I was actually very excited for the limitations that we set out by having the household object and the lens that we currently own. So I can order up a lens from B&H or something. Mm-hmm. And then probably after about 3 or so different iterations of the fork, I don't want to say I got disillusioned, but I was like, have I done everything I can already? And I think it was getting over that initial hump, mental hump. The physical side of it, everything seemed to work exactly like it, as advertised. But it was getting my mindset back into, how do I approach this in a more creative way than this is a fork? Right. And then once I got through that barrier, then it became a lot more fun than work. And then I think the second more difficult thing for me was a software learning curve, because Helicon is deceptively simple. It's pretty easy to operate, but there's a lot to it. Like you mentioned before, I didn't clean up some of those images like I could by copying or cloning from previous layers. I did a few later on, but at the beginning I didn't do as much. And so I think it was a learning, a learning curve. That was my biggest hurdle. And then I guess the third physical side of it would be just limitations with how close I had to bring the object to the objective, so to the lens. So it was a creative limitation. So I'm not unhappy with that, but it was something to work around.
Gotcha. Thank you for all those. I experienced a bunch of the same things that you did. But I've also developed this attitude over the years. I'm not alone in this, is that boundaries can become advantages, and I think when we constructed this challenge, saying that we had to be limited to one common object and we had to be limited to lenses we had on hand was really helpful, because it didn't, when you have an infinite amount of opportunity, you have an infinite amount opportunity to distract yourself from achieving. So those boundaries helped us focus.
Agreed.
Pun fully intended. I've seen in the comments, and I just want to say for a second, when you get one of these retro adapters from NOVOFLEX, it's very important to understand this. They come with a 58mm thread. If you want to use any other size lens that has a different filter thread on it, you need to get a step ring. You can get the ones that NOVOFLEX has, or you can get ones from somebody else. But it's absolutely essential if your lens does not have a 58mm thread, which isn't the most, common. Like I guess for a 50mm lens, that's fine. I know my Petzval has that too, because I tried reversing it earlier today.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah, I was free lensing, man. I was just trying, and then I'm like, ooh, this fits. So, but yeah, keep in mind that you must have the proper step ring. So check what your lens is on the inside of your cap. It's going to say right here. It's going to tell you what the filter thread diameter is in millimeters. So it might be 62, it might be 77, might be 95. You got to check that. Also, I found that it was challenging to get out of my own way. Yeah. In some cases, I was so focused on the technical setup and designing the lighting, in the beginning at least, that I forgot to be creative. It's like, oh, I made the picture. Like, whoa, check. And I'm like, that wasn't why we started doing this. We started doing this because it was a creative challenge. And I had to remind myself of that. And I found it really enriching to go through this and check.
I learned a lot more about lighting as well. I get the gist of lighting, and I can say inverse square roll, and people go, wow, lighting, and that's fine. But practical usage of lighting is very interesting at that level. It's, again, like I said before, the principle is the same, but I enjoyed the creative, okay, if I move it just a little bit, and I did have some limitations on where I could go. I have the Viola2 on the Luxli, so it's actually a much larger light source, and I couldn't get into certain niche areas. You know, the AdaptaLux might prove more handy in that respect.
Yeah.
I even supplemented light by turning on the flashlight on my iPhone and sticking it underneath the fork at one moment. You know. And I like those creative workarounds. Back to the DIY side of things. You know, it's like, what can I do to make it work? Okay, I have there's a picture in one of my behind the scenes there. It's the Lume Cube, the little filter, this little filter on a flashlight. Just plugged it in there, so I'd have a soft kind of yellowish light to shoot up there. And so just use what you have. You know, you don't have to go out and buy 10,000 things to make a good image. You know, I was lucky that I've had the opportunity over the years to accumulate things, but look around. There's a lot. I made a reflector holder out of a plastic fork and a binder clip. You know, just because it's what you do when you're in the moment, you know.
It's funny. One of my favorite macro photographers in the world, Don Kamarachka, I see his setups and I'm like, he has the same clamps that we have and an arm and a flashlight. Like you'll understand like direct, diffused, or reflected light. You know which one might work for the surface that you're trying to do, but in the end, it doesn't need to be absolutely fancy. It just needs to be the light that you can work with at the time, right? So, and then when you have specific needs, you know, like I have a friend who's asked me if I would help photograph her jewelry. Like, I think that, you know, a really fancy setup would help with that because you need to diffuse some things. You need to shadow block in other areas. That's a different story, you know. Like, in this case, we're just trying to be arty, right? So,
go out and be creative. Don't just creatively accumulate new gear.
Yeah. I planned on talking about free lensing. I think I'm going to save that for next time.
Okay.
For those like Christian mentioned, if you wanted to, I'm just going to give a real brief talk about it. If you have a lens that you'd want to know whether it works for macro, all you need to do is take the lens off your camera, put it in live view, and then instead of it facing the way it should, just turn it around and hold it about the width of this adapter. You see that? That's only about ½ inch. Hold that about that far away from the front of your camera so that the lens mount is facing outwards, and then just bring an object in and out. And then you'll find out pretty quickly whether that works. You can even move the lens in and out, and you can tilt it, and you'll see you get some crazy effects. Some extra light and some extra dust might come in during that time. Be sure you have something on hand to clean your sensor. But that's what free lensing is. So you can just take any of your lenses, flip them around, and then see if they work reversed, you know. So that's the fastest way to find out. I'll probably end up doing some content that's on that gives you some visual examples, but we'll save that for another time. For those of you who are curious and want to see what we are looking at, we're going to do something we haven't done before. I'm going to paste this in the chat. So I just pasted a link to the Adobe Lightroom. What is it? That Christian and I were using together. I lost the word. It's an album. So for those of you who want to go take a look, you can go take a closer look at these images, not at streaming quality, a little bit more. And feel free to flip through those and take a look. You can even, I think you can even leave comments if you have an Adobe account. That would be cool to hear what you guys think. So next up, Christian and I are going to have another challenge where we add one thing, which is the bellows. Bellows. So we're going to get even closer. So I'm going to ask you guys in the live chat now and in the comments on the replay, please tell us. We're gonna consider all of your suggestions. Give us an object to photograph with the bellows. Keep in mind it should be kind of tiny because we're getting even closer. So we will consider all suggestions that you have. And we will both photograph the same object. We just make sure it's common enough that he and I can both have it. Yeah. And let's see, what else we got? Are we allowed to talk about what's coming up in April?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. So in April, I think it's near the end of the month, B&H will be running their macro week. And there's a lot of things planned for that. Some really cool articles and some videos, and Explorer will be doing their bit. And Matt and I will hopefully have we're going to have a nice little setup for you. Leading up, we're going to do our little challenges. I think we have maybe 2 more challenges I think we could squeeze in between, and then culminate with something special on during macro week. Details to be announced. We're looking at some external speakers who really know their craft, and that I can learn from, I hope, because I want to learn more about this. And anyway, so yeah, stay tuned. We'll keep you guys abreast of the information as we get it.
Awesome. Christian, thank you so much for
Thank you, Matt.
This creative challenge with me. It was stimulating. I can't wait to do more.
Me too.
I
enjoyed it.
This is a blast. This doesn't feel like work.
No, I get paid for this. I'm excited. I can totally live with like that.
Don't tell anybody but me too.
That's awesome. Oh, cool. Yeah, looking forward to our next one. So get those suggestions in so we can start plotting.
Awesome. So as some wrap-up stuff, some people asked, will they be able to watch the replay? If you're watching the replay, this doesn't matter to you. Yes, this was recorded. Yes, there will be a replay. And yes, you'll get a link to it in your email. Please feel free to leave questions in the chat there. We'll make sure that the email address you can reach us at is also there if you have questions or suggestions. Christian, any closing words?
Nope, can't wait for the next challenge. I had a lot of fun with this. Thanks to NOVOFLEX for making amazing gear. That made my side of the challenge a lot easier. And yeah, I can't wait to be creative again with you, brother.
Likewise. Hugs. Have fun out on the West Coast.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody who attended. We'll see you next time. We're doing these basically once a month now. So we'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.